Awesome. Let's go. All right, everybody.
Audio.
Just want to say welcome to everyone to another episode of the Thrive and Survive Research Hub podcast. I just want to say today I'm very excited because I'm interviewing somebody who is a very dear friend of mine and someone that I've learned so much from just from observing from the sidelines. So selfishly, I'm excited to be asking you questions because every time I call you and we have a conversation, you're so humble and you're so modest. You know, you ask me questions all the time, and I keep thinking to myself, damn, like, give me a chance. So the person I'm speaking to today, his name is Tineiwo Muzenda, and I'm just going to give him an opportunity to, introduce himself and give a little bit of a background in terms of what he does and where he works. So T, over to you, but I just want to say welcome and thank you so much for the time of sharing today. And yeah, just give a brief introduction.
Cool. Thank you, Alex, and thank you for having me on your show and your first candidate to be interviewed. So yeah, I'm very humbled to be here. And like you said, you learned from me, but I learned just as much from you, my brother. And yeah, I look forward to the discussion that we're going to have. But to get right into it from an introduction perspective, obviously, like you mentioned, my name is Tineiwo Muzenda. I'm not going to go too much into detail around obviously what I do, but I obviously specialize in e-commerce. Mm-hmm. Most people call me an e-commerce specialist. Mm-hmm. And I obviously currently now work for an FMCG company called Mars Incorporated. And I am basically responsible for helping them at this point to obviously grow their e-commerce market share for South Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. So yeah, that's an introduction about me from my professional perspective. In terms of personal life, I'm obviously a dad.
Yeah, that's
I have
amazing.
a daughter. Yeah, and I'm married, so I'm also a husband to my beautiful wife Melissa, and then I am a son, obviously, to my parents, Pardon and Lily Muzenda, and I have two sisters as well, Janet and Angel. So yeah, that's me on both sides of the world. In terms of who I believe I am, I just believe I'm an instrument of the universe, and I'm here to obviously give, share, and teach as much as I can in my way of obviously giving back to the world. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
And there's so much, that last bit that you've added there about teaching and sharing, there's so much I'm going to ask you about that a little bit down the road. But before we move on to other things, I just want to touch more on your role as a, I was doing research on you on LinkedIn. I felt like a creepy person that's stalking someone on Facebook.
Yeah.
But it says here you're an e-commerce national key account manager, right? Which is a great title that doesn't say a lot. I'm curious, like, what is your approach to growing a business in terms of e-commerce in Africa? We don't have to make it specific to Mars, but let's just say you have a company that is a multinational company. It has an online presence in other regions, and now it needs to cater its approach specifically to the African environment, which, as you know, has its own unique challenges. And one of the biggest mistakes that a global company would make is take something that works in America or Europe and assume that it's going to just seamlessly work in an African environment. So what's your like, broadly speaking, an approach to growing e-commerce for a company in Africa?
Yeah. So I think first things first is that I think any business needs to acknowledge that online disruption is going to happen within the African continent. And the growth of that starts off with acknowledging the fact that it's going to happen. And how you set yourself up for success when it comes to obviously getting ready for this growth is by setting a foundation that allows for you to tap into this when e-commerce eventually becomes a big thing in Africa. So the reality is that e-commerce right now is a global phenomenon. It's happening everywhere else in the world, and it started to slowly happen in South Africa going into the other African continents. So the task at hand for any global company or for any business is just to make sure that you are future-proofing yourself by making sure that you internalize the capabilities to drive e-commerce growth and market share when the wave eventually does hit. Because the reality is that as a business, if you're not ready for it and you don't build the internal capabilities before it takes off, then you're already second place. And the online world itself, is a whole ecosystem on its own that you cannot afford to lose in.
Yes.
Because it is becoming a destination of preference, particularly for the youth, not just for shopping, but for education, for engagement. And if you cannot win there, then you're most likely to lose the battle, even in the offline space. So within e-commerce, we have a term that we use called an omni-channel approach to business, which means that when you're engaging with your consumer or when you're trying to get your product to consumer, you need to be available in all spheres. There's no use your product only being available in store and not online, because your shopper sometimes shops online, and if they cannot find you online, then you've missed the opportunity to engage and be purchased as a brand. So the first thing for me, for any business, irregardless of how small or how big you are, is to make sure you internalize the capabilities, you educate within so that your current workforce can prepare for it, and then you wait. And then you wait. Because the reality is that the wave is going to hit the African continent. And like I said, he or she who's best prepared for it will surf it and ride it. And he or she who's not prepared for it will essentially lose that game, because e-commerce happens so fast. That catching up is quite a heavy mission for any business, irregardless of how skilled your staff may be.
So speaking to, you were talking about laying down a foundation for embracing this shift in the business environment from this old approach to this newer e-commerce approach. When you talk about foundation, to my mind, it speaks to the front end and the back end of an e-commerce business, whereas the front end is the digital presence. You're talking about things like the website from which customers can purchase things from. You're talking about the social media interaction and online marketing approach.
Yeah.
Whereas the back end is the maintenance of the front end, as well as the fulfillment of orders and things like that, the logistical approach. And so is there anything I'm missing in terms of foundation there when you talk about laying, you've spoken about upskilling employees so that they're ready to embrace the change of the environment. I would imagine it's updating the systems of the company itself so that you can fit into that. What else would fit into this foundational approach that you're talking about?
Yeah, so I think a very big part of it is also partnerships, right? So the reality is that you have this whole ecosystem that's operating, that's new, right? It is in isolation of what's happening in the real world. But what this online ecosystem has done is that it's taken everything that exists in the real world and has put it online. So from a back-end perspective, as an organization, you need to understand where all your products online are sitting, who's selling them, how they're being advertised, and then create a roadmap to create partnerships that allow for you to take control of your products online. And that can be done in various forms and in various ways. So I think the most common or the most popular partnership for any e-commerce integration is one with Takealot or one with Amazon, or one with any e-commerce giant within your market, right? Because the reality is that whether you're partnering with them or not, someone else is probably selling your products on that platform for you. And as a business, you don't want that risk, because the person might be inflating prices. They might be selling product that's outdated or expired, and they just won't have the brand's best interest at heart at the same level that the actual company will. So to decrease the risk of someone else controlling your brand, and obviously having ownership of your brand on such a growing channel isn't a good business move, because like I said, it becomes harder for you to control those channels and take advantage of the wave when it does come. The second thing that you'd obviously need to really, really work on is your workforce agility, right? Because like I said, it's one thing to educate internally and build internal capabilities, but the reality is that the workforce also needs to be able to adapt to the working style of partnering with some of these e-commerce giants.
Yeah.
And that, for me, is probably the hardest thing, right? Because working in the traditional world, I mean, I'll give you an example. You can take days to reply to certain emails, or even months and weeks to execute on certain tasks and projects. In the online space, things like distribution and activations happen with the click of a button.
Yeah.
It's more just about getting your ducks in a row, doing what you've agreed on, and with the click of a button, you already have something that's live to the full audience that is shopping online.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to break it down even further, right? I'll use marketing, right? In the real world, you go to a media agency, you say, I want to run a billboard campaign. They say, okay, cool, we'll give you 200 billboards across the country. It's going to take us 2 weeks to put up all the billboards. You sit and you wait. With e-commerce, you can go to your partners and say, I want to run a digital billboard campaign across the whole country. They'll say, cool, send it to me, it'll be live tomorrow.
And so that, yeah.
So that's the difference in the agility that you require, right? And
sure.
If you're not able to tap into that to that way of working, then these big giants just won't find interest in partnering with you, unfortunately.
You know, it's so interesting that you talk about that, because that's actually a great platform for segueing into the next thing I wanted to ask you about, which is a bit more personal. On the subject of change and embracing change. You know, like you said, one of the biggest challenges in an organization is with upskilling employees, it's taking them from a place of comfort into the unknown.
Yeah.
You know, they are obviously, everyone has the human potential to learn and grow. It's just about whether you're willing to put yourself in that position or not.
Yeah.
Something I've noticed about you and your career is how, whether it's educational or professional, you are consistently putting yourself into unknown environments, embracing change, and you're not shying away from, you know, maybe putting yourself in a position where you don't know what to do. I'm curious, are you somebody who just recognizes an opportunity and just takes it by the horns without any fear? Or is something, what's the emotional experience for you when you have to face change? So emotionally, how do you navigate that? And then logically, what are some steps that you take to make sure that you make that change a successful one? So let's speak first to the emotional experience. Like, do you get nervous when you're facing change, or are you just so confident that it doesn't even affect you?
Yeah, so I think that's a very good question, Alex, I must say. And obviously, I think change for anybody who is used to something is a very big challenge, right? And in my case, yes, I've gone through a lot of change, but I've also spent a lot of time in environments where I was obviously very much used to it. So for me, my approach to change is an opportunity to grow. That's always how I look at it. And I never compromise on taking the opportunity to grow. So I always keep that top of mind, right? Because the reality is that if you're not going to face change, you're not going to have the opportunity to fail, of which I believe is the most important opportunity you need to try to take advantage of. Yes, I'm lucky enough. I haven't failed, where it matters most. But the reality is that I am prepared to take the fall.
On the edge, you know?
Exactly. And I am prepared to fail because, I think it's in your greatest failures that you become yourself. And I don't think there's anyone who's achieved a lot in life who hasn't taken a fall. So I always acknowledge that, and I always acknowledge the potential of failing. But in doing that, I also acknowledge the opportunity to really grow and take things to the next level should I succeed. So I mitigate the chances of failure by reading and by preparing myself for this change. And I think, the best way to future-proof yourself or to protect yourself from failure, or not to fully protect yourself, but to minimize the impacts of failure, is to read. Because there's no new idea in this world everything has already been done. We're just enhancing and adding on to previously explored ideas.
Sure.
And if you go into I always call it the storehouse of universal intelligence, which is a library, you will find the attempts someone else has done within your field to add on and improve so that you can enhance and take things to the next level based on what they did in the past.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
yeah. So whenever I'm in that type of environment, I always create a dotted line going backwards. I look at industry leaders, I look at researchers, and I look at other entrepreneurs who've tried to do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I read about them and their failures, and I learn from those, and they capitalize by not doing the same things within my specific role. And
Sure.
through that, increase my chances of succeeding.
You see, that's very interesting for me. That concept of future proofing and that everything repeats itself. You know, the situation that you're facing is maybe new to you, but someone somewhere who might not be as intelligent as you has faced it successfully.
Yeah.
I don't use the phrase not as intelligent as you to be arrogant, but more so to reassure you that you have it within your realm of ability. You don't have to put people on a pedestal and be like, oh, well, he did it, so that he's obviously some Superman character. It's like, no, it was just as uncomfortable for him, and yet he faced the challenge, you know?
100%. 100%.
You know, when you talk about change and disruption, often you run the risk of disappointing people because you're disrupting the status quo. Yeah. And there are always winners and losers in terms of disruption, because there's the old guard who are comfortable with how things are and they're currently winning and they don't want to change. And then there's the new guard that's hungry for that change because they see it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
When you look at the changes that you've made in your career, you know, you're walking away from a company that you're working at and you're adding value to, and people want you there, right? And people took a chance on you, obviously. How do you navigate that fear of disappointing people around you? You know, how do you avoid the trap of people pleasing in pursuit of your own personal growth? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah. So I think for me, what I've always done with any person I've worked with or with any company I've dedicated myself to is from the get-go, give my all. Right? I always give my all, and I make it also very clear that I am here to contribute, you know, to total universe. So for me, I believe I'm here to contribute to e-commerce as a whole. Sure. You know, and my current role within the company now is to contribute to e-commerce through this company. However, what's in the future must stay in the future. We're currently in the present time. And as I'm serving you, I will serve fully to meet all the objectives and goals that we've set for the next 3 to 5 years.
Yes.
And I will not leave until I see that through.
Yes.
Yes, there might be more opportunities that may come as we achieve and as we grow. And the chances are we'll always surpass what we've put in place. But the reality is that there comes a time when man needs to evolve, and there comes a time when man needs to grow. Sure. And I've been fortunate enough to have leaders and to work for companies that understand this philosophy well. They understand the philosophy of handing over the baton stick, because if I'm to sit in the same position, even though I'm doing an awesome job for too long, I actually become the problem.
Yes.
And how the universe has developed and grown over the years is by great leaders understanding when it's their time to step down. 100%. So I believe that every great leader knows when it's their time to step down based on how they would have coached the workforce or the environment that they've created to be ready to take care of itself. So in my previous company, I would have stayed, but I built such a strong team, I believe, to almost operate without me. And in my last 6 to 8 months when I was there, I was happy, but I had given them everything I had. I'd given them all the knowledge. I had taught them to work independently but collaboratively. And it had gotten to the point where I was just there because I was the team's manager.
Yeah.
And when I came to the acceptance of that, I then made it my responsibility to find an opportunity where I could now grow and then leave my team in a position where they are now able to grow and contribute and make a difference to a level that I may have not been able to make if I had stayed. So yeah, that's just my philosophy, stepping down at the right time. And I think every great company, every great organization has become greater by the leader stepping down at the right time, knowingly that they have a workforce that can take things to the next level.
That's a great answer. And I think that's such a great example of what leadership is actually about, where a great leader doesn't necessarily want to be at the top of the tree or at the front of the line. You know, a great leader wants the organization to be strong enough that it doesn't need them. And it's such a counter approach to how a lot of people operate nowadays, where it's more about, I want to be needed, I want to be secure, whereas the leader is saying, no, I want insecurity in the sense that you don't need me anymore, because that means I've done a good job. I also think it's great to highlight the fact that a company is bigger than you, and it was there before you, it's going to be there after you. And you're just kind of like a custodian for a certain period of time to leave. You're leaving your mark and you're going off on your own journey, you know? And I think that's also a beautiful metaphor for how life is with people as well. You know, if you look at the nature of life, people will come and go, even the people that you love the most, you know, that cycle of life and death and rebirth. The truth is, it doesn't matter how important you are in 200 years, probably no one's going to remember you. You know,
100%.
Even if you're the greatest of men or women, it's just the way things work. Okay, I just want to touch on a couple of things before we wrap up, because we're going to run out of time. But okay, as somebody who knows you very well and who's enjoyed your company a lot, something that you said to me when you were at school, and it's something that I share myself actually, was that you weren't somebody who was a, let's just say, enthusiastic academic. You were an exceptional athlete. And I think you were so exceptional that your records today still stand at our school. But today, you are somebody who is such an enthusiastic learner with such a genuine curiosity about people, about things. You know, I've observed you when you interact with people, the curiosity that you display to what they do and how they do it. And, you know, if they're successful, how did they become successful? What was their journey? It's clear that it's authentic. What I'd like to know is, when did you make the switch from, you know, and you can, I'm choosing my words, or you can use your own. Learning is not something that I'm interested in, I'm not pursuing it actively, to, wow, I love to learn. Learning is awesome. And if I can learn as much as I can, I'm going to do that. I'm a sponge. Was it one moment where they just clicked, or was it like a gradual evolution of you as a person as you matured?
So on my end, I think obviously growing up in a family where education was the only way out, kind of to a certain extent made me want to resist it or prove that philosophy wrong. So me being good at sport at a young age, and sport obviously taking me through, you know, most of my school career, and also I did get away with a lot of stuff just purely because, you know, I was good at sport. Made me think this would allow me to just have an easier life, right? But the reality is that when you're in school, you're in a little box, you're in a little bubble, right? And that bubble is nothing in comparison to what the real world is like. So when I left school and I went into the real world, my parents really pushed me into the real world. Like, okay, cool. You don't want school. You want to do business? Then go see what business is about. And my parents gave me a year and a half, almost 2 years, to basically go out there and explore. And I took that opportunity by really going out and meeting as many business owners as I could. And through meeting many business owners, came to the realization that business wasn't easy. And it was in that assessment that I realized I need to start reading. And it was in those engagements that I also realized that textbook theory isn't going to get you through life.
Yeah.
And it was also in the same engagements that I realized that the most important thing about business and life is how you relate to people, how you treat them, and how humble you can be in your engagements with them. Because the only way to build a successful business is to be able to work with any type of person from any background and any educational level in terms of how intelligent they are. And that starts with working with people who have nothing. So yeah, it was in that journey that I decided to start learning more, because I, of course, had gone to private school, and we never got much time to interact with the real world, never got much time to interact with people from unfortunate backgrounds, never got to interact with people from international communities.
Sure.
And reading shortened or bridged the gap between me not having those opportunities and me knowing how to deal with those people on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. So like the way I understand that is it was through exposure to this external challenge of business that the questions came to you, and then that was when the desire for answers came in response to that.
100%.
Yeah, I share that. I agree. It's something. It speaks very much to my own personal experience of like, and I think that's why it's so important to step outside of your comfort zone, because it forces you to ask new questions that you didn't have to ask before. And then there's the cycle of ask the question, find the answer.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking to reading, because I know you're somebody who's incredibly well read. Are you reading anything right now that you can share? And after that, what are your favorite books that you would say resonated with you the most, and why? So let's start with reading anything right now.
Yeah. So at this point, so to give you context, I'm on a 5-year break from reading complete books.
5-year break.
Starting new books.
Wow.
So over the last 11 years, I've read 211 books.
What?
You believe it? And obviously the thing with reading is that it's addictive, but the purpose of reading is to apply what you've learned.
Yes.
So I did go through a phase of reading and accumulating knowledge and noting all this knowledge. But within 10 years, it's impossible to apply what you've learned from 211 books.
Sure.
So I took a step back, and I've now gone back to the notebooks and the books I was reading. And on a month-to-month basis, I'll take out the best bits that apply to what I'm going through now and apply them in real life. And to go back to 2-3 questions that you asked me, a few moments ago, but how do I navigate change and challenge? I navigate change and challenge by that dotted line I drew backwards through all the content I read and apply it in what I'm going through now and what I'm still going to go through in the future. So in terms of favorite books, my favorite book is a book by Woodrow Wilson, who was an American president. It's called When a Man Comes to Himself. It's a very short book. It's I think it's 58 pages. You can read it in literally half an hour. And a quick synopsis of the book is basically about man's purpose and journey within life, where you are, of course, an infant. You then become independent and only cater for yourself. And then you get the responsibility through business or fatherhood or marriage to cater for others.
Mm.
And it is in that realization where you realize that in order to become a man, you need to cater for others. So the book like further dives into that journey, the benefits of taking responsibility of other people, and how to basically navigate the challenges that come with that.
Yeah.
And it basically closes off by saying, when you reach the end of your life, when you do look back, those responsibilities you took are going to make it easier for you to close your eyes one day and essentially rest. And one of my favorite lines from that book is that, he who ends life as a bachelor, or he who ends life without working or contributing to the world, is a failure.
100%.
So life is about contributing. You don't have to be married to contribute, right? You don't have to have a family to contribute, right? But you need to know that in order to become a man, you need to add value to society, and that is the purpose of life. And if you do not give yourself the opportunity to contribute, when you do get to that deathbed, it will haunt you, and you will feel like you lived an unfulfilled life.
That's such a beautiful concept. I love that, and it's so timeless as well. And I think such a, what's interesting. There's so much I can add to that, but like, one, the concept of reading for purpose and not just for pleasure. Great concept. And knowledge is not power. Knowledge is potential power. So just because you know something, if you're not applying it, it's useless.
100%. 100%.
They say the man
100%.
who reads and does not apply what he reads is just as bad as the man who doesn't read.
100%.
So great,
100%.
Great point. And the second thing, it's interesting how the scripture from a different time was more focused on purpose than the scripture of today, which is more focused on pleasure. Everything today is about the internal world of yourself. Pursue yourself. Pursue your own personal pursuits, I guess I should say. Whereas everything of the older generation was contribute, family, service. John F. Kennedy, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country.
100%. 100%.
It's interesting that you said that was your favorite book, because right now I'm reading a book that it's basically all of the inaugural speeches of the US presidents from the founding of the United States up until Donald Trump. And
oh, wow. Interesting.
I've been reading one speech each night from each president, and it is such an incredible thing. It's like time traveling. It's literally like time traveling. You see a little slice of the world of their time. That's the coolest thing about books. Okay, one more thing I want to ask you before I close off this interview. So, over the last couple of weeks and months, something that's been an idea that's been playing around in my mind is the concepts of visualization, focus, and manifestation. And I think manifestation gets a bad rep because it's a concept that doesn't really get explained. It's a multi-layered concept, right? In my because manifestation is not just thinking about something. A thought is an intention that you set for yourself. And then the actions that follow create this thought. It makes it reality.
100%.
But it all starts with thought. What I'd like to know is, if you look at the life that you have today, is it something that you visualized for yourself at a younger age, having a beautiful wife, a beautiful daughter, and another child on the way, a career that challenges you and makes you grow, abundance financially, personally, spiritually, intellectually? I mean, obviously, I know you've got your own things that you want to improve in your life, but from the outside, you do look like a very well-rounded, successful individual. And I want to know, did visualization and manifestation play a role in that for you?
Yeah. So I think the reality is that, I mean, we are the only, from how to say, creatures on earth that have the ability to imagine, right? So I think that's the first thing that everyone needs to be very aware of. And the reality is that what makes us different from a dog and a lion and a chimpanzee is the ability to imagine. And I, lucky enough, was able to understand that at a very young age, purely because I was able to see my parents, who came from a very poor background, basically carve their way through life by consistently imagining how much better it could be if they did certain things and stuck to doing it. So for me, I apply manifestation every day of my life, irregardless of whether I'm going through a good or a bad time. And I attach my visual thoughts or my imagination to what I'm doing today. Because essentially, that's what gives you the fuel, petrol, to continue doing it, right?
Yeah.
Because the reality is that what you, and this is a very common thing that everyone knows, and I think the term is commercialized, right? But what you think about most eventually happens. However, what nobody says is that what you think about most won't happen if your actions aren't aligned to producing what you're thinking about.
Yes.
So the manifestation, the thinking of it, needs to be supported by the doing in the time when it isn't in your physical appearance, in order for it to come to fruition. And like to take it back to like the holy books or like the Bible, if you like read like the book of Genesis, and yes, I'm not the most like religious person, but I have read most of the holy books. The art of creation is manifestation. It is the process of thinking, and while thinking, doing, in the belief that what you're doing is going to bring about what you're thinking.
Yes.
Yes, it doesn't always happen. Unfortunately, that's life. But the reality is that, also to go back to Murphy's Law, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah.
Right? So while you're doing, yes, what you're thinking about may not come to fruition, but the universe knows your effort. The universe knows your core intention. And based on you doing what you need to do and doing it in such great faith, the universe will reward you accordingly. And 99% of the time when people become successful or highly successful, they always tell you, I never imagined I would be this successful. I've watched a lot of interviews of like multimillionaires and billionaires or big sports stars.
Sure.
They all knew they were going to be successful, but not as successful as they are today.
Sure.
And in that journey of manifestation, a lot of them had big failures, right? But because the universe acknowledged the effort and the genuine intention to better based on this thought you were having, back to Murphy's Law, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. The universe then granted them something that was bigger than what they even imagined. So for me, that's what manifestation is about.
Sure.
And I consistently visualize what I want. But if that doesn't happen, I still believe that through me doing these efforts, the universe will guide me, even through failure, to a place where I'm meant to be, and to a place which may be even better than what I'm imagining for myself.
That's a great point, because there's a couple of things there. One, sometimes you get what you need and not what you want.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get what you need and not what you want. And
exactly.
It's like you talk about faith and spirituality. When you say to God, God guide me, God sometimes guides you in places that you don't want to go, but you need to go. And that place,
100%. 100%.
The second thing is, when you start a journey, especially when you've never been to the destination that you're trying to get to, you not know what it looks like.
Yeah.
So, I talk, for me, it's a big concept about it is intention. It's about intent and alignment. You talk about alignment a lot. I remember you and I had a conversation. You talked about alignment. Alignment for me is when your intentions and your actions are the same.
100%. 100%.
If you are not in alignment, you're not going to be successful, because you can have the beautiful intentions, but if your actions are contrary to that, you're not going to get anywhere. It's like saying, I want to go to Cape Town, but you're driving in the opposite direction.
Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, above all, it's also just about understanding that, like, you're also part of a system. You're part of a construct, right? Yeah. You're part of, like, a galaxy that operates in a certain way.
Sure.
Like, you can't defy the laws, and you need to operate within those laws and at the frequency of those laws in order to be you.
Yes.
That's just the reality. A lion is a lion.
Yes.
Right? A lion can't be a chicken. Exactly. And that's the same thing about being a human. That's the same thing about being a man. That's the same thing about wanting to be an achiever. An achiever is an achiever, right? Yeah. But an achiever, to be an achiever, must do what achievers do to achieve.
Yeah.
And the road to success is a dark one. It's a road that has lots of disappointments, right? And it's a road that, unfortunately, only the few can take, purely because it requires you to consistently do without seeing, and hope and believe that, obviously, irregardless of where the universe takes you, like you said, even to the places you don't want to go, you will go, because it is the way to go.
Yeah, and it's like visualization and hope are two things that are inseparable, because that is part of visualization. You know, it's having hope that the future can be better than the present.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like an act of prayer. You know, you're putting this message to the universe and to God, basically, of saying, like, I believe that this can be true.
Yeah.
But yeah, T, I just want to say thank you so much for answering the questions the way you have and sharing the knowledge that you have. You know, I think it can help a lot of people. It helped me massively. And I know I'm going to be listening to this episode by myself with an exam pad, taking notes selfishly. So yeah, I want to wrap this up. And this is not the last time that I'm going to interview you, for sure. Before we say goodbye, I just want to ask, if you were speaking to 21-year-old Tineiwo and you were going to use the benefit of hindsight, what would you say to him?
Sure, that's a good question. So for me, going back, I would definitely say be willing to fail more. I think, like I said, failure is an essential part of growth. And number two, share more, give more, right? And interact more with people who come from different backgrounds than you do, because that's where knowledge hides. Knowledge hides in places where you wouldn't expect it to be hiding, and that lies in indifference. And that's why, like, South Africa as a country is one of the most respected in the world, because of the diversity that we have as a country. So for me, like I said, share more, give more, and spend more time with people from different backgrounds, because that's where knowledge hides.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, my brother. I really appreciate it.
Cool. I appreciate it, eh? And yeah, we'll chat soon.
That's the episode. And next time you're going to have T interviewing me. So
awesome. I can't wait.
All right. Cheers, everyone.